Welcome back to the Maelstrom, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a while, but we are back with some Conquest content today. We will have games for you very shortly to go along with some of our other content, more unboxings and all of that. But for today, we're going to be discussing the 1.5 rule set, what that has changed in terms of how you play your game, and also, what special rules have been added along the way and which have been changed. So today joining me is Putt Hut and Hanser Vico. We are going to be discussing this together and kind of going over how each one of those rules has impacted our armies. If there's anything that we fail to cover, because we are sure to do so, we're just human, we make mistakes like the rest of you, make sure that you leave a comment below to tell us about changes that have impacted the way that you play and also your general overall feel for 1.5. Hanser, initial thoughts. What are you thinking so far for the 1.5 rules update?
Well, I believe the rules update has been. I mean, generally anybody that's come into this game is going to feel. They're not going to feel a whole lot of difference, I feel, at least in terms of the general overlay of the rules. There's only been really more just, slight corrections and tweaks, it feels, more than just a absolute overhaul of the rules that I think some people were expecting.
I could see that for sure, especially like you said, people that are newer to it. It's not going to make a lot of difference initially for them. How about you?
I think the majority of the 1.5 changes were for Army changes, special rules adjustments to bring armies in line with each other. Uh, I feel like that was the biggest reason for the update.
I agree with that. I think most of the basic rules, we were looking at streamlining changes more than anything. I do think there are some things in the basic rules that will need addressing in the long run, but I think that is an intention for them going forward. The biggest one is, you two know, for me, is the magic phase. I'd definitely like to see them make some changes to the way magic works so it's not quite so automatically successful, and maybe has a little bit different impact than just damage dealing, which it seems like it largely goes to now, at least in our group's experience. But I do think that's why they call it 1.5, not 2.0. I think this was mainly just to streamline some things and make rules make a little bit more sense where applicable. We will jump straight into things with some of the changes. The first one that we wanted to talk about was impact attacks. It's a minor change, but impact attacks before would round down the number of hits that your stand made. So if your stand had, for example, like Brute Drones and Warbred had 5 attacks, and you were doing your impact attacks, you would only receive 2 impact attacks apiece. Now that is rounded up, so that's going to give you a third attack, which I think will be a little bit of a nice change. I know that's a minor one. I don't think that affects anything in either of your primary factions, does it?
Maybe a blooded. That's
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. If he had ended up with an odd number of attacks, what about you, Fathead? I think your stuff.
Until my drakes come out, it's not going to affect me.
That's right. I keep forgetting. I was trying to remember how many attacks your automaton had, and then I remembered they don't have impact attacks, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so another change that is a little bit more influential is determining the number of shots. Before, you would take half the number of shots per model, but the way it was worded, if you played single model stands, for example, the Sea Yachtnar with Barrage, or the Avatara that have ranged attacks, if they were outside of half range, they would still get full shots because there was only one model on the base. However, the way that's been changed now, the stand will have its shots. So you're only going to get half shots with, again, Sea Yachtnars, etc., single model stands. We had wondered before why the Wadroon Raptor Riders had strong arm because one model stands got full shots. Well, now we see why. It does make a difference there. H, how do you see that playing into the Nords? I know you haven't seen the Sea Yachtnar yet, but
Well, right now, I've always considered the Sea Yachtnar with his volley of one. The fact that he did get 10 shots but only had volley of one, the only reason I was honestly considering it is because, he was essentially size 3. He could see over stuff. And while Volley 1 isn't going to be hitting a lot. 10 shots, if he had his full shots, I could still see some use for that. But being half shot at a certain range definitely kind of makes me rethink that a little bit on what his value is on the table, particularly now that the Mountain Yatnar has been kind of beefed up and the Ice Yatnar is definitely.
Yeah, they are both very scary for sure. But what about you for your Drakes? How do you see that impacting anything?
I feel like it's going to make my Hellbringer Drake a little bit harder to use. If he didn't have Overcharge, I don't think he'd be useful at all.
Yeah, because the combat Drake does feel slightly better in light of that, but Overcharge is a wild card that's going to have. I think we're going to have to see it played.
Yeah.
To see how that comes out. All right, another big change is the Inspire action. All of you have been playing for a while know before Inspire was simply +1 Clash. Now that cannot carry you above Clash 4, and you gain the ability to reroll rolls of natural 6 for your next clash action that turn, rather than gaining the Clash 5 from it. H, how do you see this impacting your play with the Nords?
Well, the only two that I know that, essentially come with Clash 4 straight out the gate are essentially the Blooded and the Conungir. So, in terms of them, it definitely makes me wonder about, buying stuff like Aspect of the Dragon for them and how much I want to sink into stuff like Combat Retinues. I know, because it almost seems to me that you either want to go all the way to a 6 to try to get the relentless blows, or just, don't bother at 5, I guess.
That is kind of a strange part about the rule, an unintended consequence, whatever you want to call it, that it feels like there's that law of diminishing returns, and then suddenly you're getting a return again. So trying to get past 5 and 2-6 really feels like a more important thing, like you said. What about you, Eric? How do you see that working in terms of your Dragon Slayers?
I think it's going to help my Dragon Slayers get more hits on average, just because I'm rerolling the unmodified 6s. I feel like it's going to change my whole Dre big time, where he's already Clash 4 and he throws such a huge number of attacks for me. I feel like it's going to be hard to justify giving him Combat 3, for example, to make him Clash 5, because he's already going to be rerolling 6s, so the misses he's going to have is going to be minimal.
Yep. And you've also got that thing now with the Combat 3 retinue not giving you +1 to your cleave, but giving you cleave 1, which almost makes the third level of combat retinue feel superfluous for a Ray.
Yep, I agree.
All right, and then one other point through those basic rules is the command models. Now you are restricted to not having more than 4 in a unit. In most units, that's not going to be an issue because you don't have access to that many, but it is worth noting that you cannot have more than 4 command models in your regiments anymore. Can't think right off of a lot of effects. There are only going to be a couple of units that's really going to come into play with, but it is worth noting that is a change. Now, in a little bit bigger of a rule in the draw events here is Regeneration. H, I'll let you take that one away because Regeneration has changed tremendously.
Yeah, so I always consider Regeneration practically like a game of Wheel of Fortune, depending on your wounds. Basically, of how much your wounds get done to you before your draw event goes off.
Yes.
And you get to see how much gets brought back. So it was like there were instances where a whole stand would come back, and there were instances where somebody got nicked in the leg, and it's like, oh, okay, you only get that back. So it was definitely rather finicky, to say the least. So I'm actually glad for Regeneration being a set standard depending on the unit. I know Trolls are 5 and Werewolves are 3 now, so it's nice to be able to know, okay, I'm going to get that many back without having to worry about what people are going to do to me to see what happens.
Yeah, and I also kind of think I think we've talked about this before, but I don't really like rules that take me out of the immersion of the game. And regeneration always felt like one of those rules to me before, where I wasn't encouraged to do as much damage as possible to your trolls. I was encouraged to finish as many stands as I could and then do you one more wound. And I felt like I was playing with an abacus rather than fighting your army. And now it feels more natural. It feels like, there's a set number of trolls he can get back. And yeah, I can still view it that same way of, if I do less than this many wounds, it's not even going to matter to hit him. But at least now it's this set number. It's not, something that I can game to take advantage of to the same degree as I could before. So I think that's a good change. It gives you, exactly what you're going to get back each time, and your opponent isn't encouraged to game the system to prevent your regeneration. Another big change, this one has been hotly contentious, I think, is Deadly Blades and Deadly Shot. So before, with Deadly Blades and Deadly Shot, anytime you cause wounds to multi-wound models, and it got past their defense roll, they would add 2 wounds to the wound pool. It was incredibly punishing, especially I feel Deadly Shot was much more punishing than Deadly Blades, because Deadly Blades was limited in what could have it, and when it did hit, at least they had to work to get to combat with you. The Deadly Shot felt very brutal because there wasn't a lot you could do about it. You were just standing there and getting clobbered. However, I do think that they have pendulum swung this rule too far in the opposite direction in an attempt to fix it. Now, anytime your character or your unit rolls a 6 for their injury roll against an attack that has Deadly Shot or Deadly Blades, it will add 2 wounds to the wound pool. Now, an important distinction there is it no longer only applies to multi-wound models. It goes against any unit. So if you have single wound models that are hit by Deadly Shot, and you roll a 6 for their save, you will lose 2 models rather than just 1 like before. H, your thoughts on this?
Well, I definitely would say that I always seem to be on the receiving end of Deadly Shot quite a bit.
Yeah, Mountain Jotnars were basically a meme within the community for getting Deadly Shot off the table.
So, well, I am glad that, my Jotnar doesn't have to worry about walking into the wrong neighborhood. I do kind of agree that I think Deadly Shot and Deadly Blade probably should have scaled depending on what you were hitting to make it a little bit more essentially fair to whether it was a multi-wound model or a brute or a monster in that regard. I think we could have found some kind of median working with that. I'd have to see how effective it is against just units wholesale, I guess, because since that is something of a new thing, to see how effective that would be against, shooting a bunch of militia or something. The only other thing that I do find a little kind of odd about this is usually most rules operate on you rolling a 1 when you do something. This one operates on the opponent rolling a 6 for their defense,
which feels very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I'm curious on how it's going to interact with, for example, if something has armor piercing and it knocks you completely out of your defense, do you still roll a defense roll? And if you roll a 6, you take 2 wounds, or is Deadly Shot and Deadly Blades just ignored because you can't roll a 6?
Yeah, and that's a valid thing, and it also, in my opinion, adds a slight. It's not huge, but it adds a slight layer of timekeeping or of bookkeeping in the game that didn't need to be there. For example, if it was on a 1 to hit, it would have at least been, okay, we already know. Now it's, I've ignored your save. Do I have to roll a bunch of saves that I can't possibly make just to see if any of them are 6s? It does, and personally, I feel like it would have. I agree completely. It was too good before. Deadly Shot in particular. I think Deadly Blade was in the ballpark of being okay. But I think with Deadly Shot, they would have been better off to have made it where if you roll a 1 to hit, it causes 2 wounds, because then it eliminates that need to roll that extra die in the instance of armor piercing and needing a 6. The bigger issue, though, for me is it gives the player with the Deadly Shot rule a few more chances to activate Deadly Shot because they're rolling it on all of their dice rather than just the ones that succeed having a chance of being a Deadly Shot. Which we'll see. We haven't obviously seen it in action yet. We will see that shortly. I'm sure one of us will put some Deadly Shot on the table and we'll see what happens with it. But my gut reaction is I think that they've swung too far in the opposite direction with it. And now Deadly Shot and Deadly Blades are kind of just gravy on a unit that was already worth taking. It's not a rule that you actively seek out anymore because it really doesn't bring much to your battle plan. Any other thoughts on it?
I think we're good.
All right. We'll move on to support now. A minor wording change, but a big potential change for support. You now only receive your support bonuses if your opponent is engaged in your front arc. So you will not get this in your flanks or if you're being attacked from the rear. To me, that only makes sense because your opponent takes the time to get into that position. You're not set up to spear to the flanks. You guys got thoughts on that one?
I mean, it makes sense to me, much like with Shield. Essentially, it needs to be in the front, and I'm glad now that it's also an X as well. So, certain units, getting different values to how many attacks that they can get out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I have very minimal support in my army, so I don't feel like it's going to change my army construction at all. But as far as hitting other armies, I'm going to try harder to hit them in the flank now than just hit in the front arc and try and weather the storm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, change to leaders. I think this was about the last change on basic rules we were going to discuss. Before, you were always paying for leaders. You always had to decide, do I want a leader, do I not want a leader? Which for me personally always felt kind of strange because I always imagine a military unit, you have to have some kind of leader in the squad. So now your leaders on infantry, I believe, right? Are free? Or is it? It's just infantry, correct?
Just infantry.
Okay. Thoughts on that?
At least for my Flame Berserkers, it makes it worthwhile. Because before it was 25 points and all it did was let me withdraw.
Yeah, which how often were Flame Berserkers wanting to withdraw?
Never. So it felt like a wasted 25 points.
Yeah, the price felt very strange for... I know the reroll's the minor part of it, but that did feel very strange for them.
But my Flame Berserkers already had rerolls.
Yeah. Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. You're not getting a benefit there. You're only getting it on having a fighting withdrawal. And you're resolve 5, so even if you do want to withdraw, how often are you really going to be taking wounds anyway?
Yep.
And maybe that was their point. Maybe their point was, in the chances you do roll a 6. But you're going to have to play a lot of games before you withdraw 6 times with Flame Berserkers.
Yeah.
My only thing with it is I kind of find it funny, though, that, it's giving you that withdrawal ability for free, and it's essentially now for basically all infantry.
Mm-hmm.
I know there are some things that I think don't get leaders for some weird reason.
Yeah, there's a handful here and there.
But it just seems kind of... It basically seems like now it's pretty much the withdrawal, the ability to half your wounds on withdrawal is now kind of a standardized thing across the board. So it definitely makes me wonder how if withdrawing is now much more of a viable option to pulling out of combat more. I know my trolls that one game would have certainly loved that.
Oh man, I don't even want to talk about that. I had forgotten about that. Yeah, for those of you who didn't see it, H was involved in a game against the 100 Kingdoms where his trolls failed a withdraw and he rolled 12 for his amount of wounds lost. So he had, after resolve, I think you had, 2 trolls left alive?
Yes, 2 trolls.
Yeah, so 10 trolls died because they tried to leave combat. That would have been very nice to have turned that 12 wounds into a 6, wouldn't it?
Some wounds don't regenerate.
Some wounds don't grow back, exactly. Okay, so that kind of goes over some of the basic changes. We are going to continue our How to Play series that we started before. For those of you who are pretty new to the game or are looking to get a better grasp on some of the basic rules. For today, though, we're kind of focused more to the people who do play the game and are just looking for what has changed. So for those of you who are pretty new, stay tuned. We are going to keep doing more videos to cover those basic rules. The next thing today that we want to cover, we are going to go into all the army lists and what has been changed and updated in them, but we're going to do that in separate videos to this one. For this video, the next thing we wanted to discuss was draw events and special rules, what had changed there. In particular, what had been added. Some of them are going to be just spicy speculation because nothing has them yet, but others are immediately impacting armies. So the first thing, a lot of existing special rules, for example, Fury and Bastion and Support gained X, which means that they are going to have the potential to give you more than just 1 point of bonus. Personally, I think this is huge, especially if we start seeing things with Bastion 2 or even Bastion 3. That would be insane. H, what do you think? What are you seeing with this?
Well, I've already seen cases where Fury has had more multiples attached to it. I think Nords are the big one because of their army-wide rule that they got, where they can have more than one Fury if the circumstances apply to it. I think Bastion, I would hope that would be one that would be a little bit more restricted on whatever gets that, because defense is a big thing in this game. The ability, already Bastion always feels like an auto include anyways for certain units.
Definitely.
I think that as long as they don't go overboard with it, it's not going to be as big of a deal. If they gave my hold things the ability to take Bastion 2, I think it'd be a little absurd. It'd be an auto include at that point, I think. Fury, I don't think is as big of a deal.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that it depends how these rules are going to play out. Some of them seem very good on the surface, like H was talking about the Fury bonuses. We're hoping to see his Nords in action very, very soon, so hopefully we'll get to see what some of that looks like. But it's very cool to see some of these rules having that chance to stack. So moving on through our draw event, so we already discussed Regeneration. That's the other big one that had changed. So I guess we'll move into the special rules now. The first of those is Bodyguards, which nothing in the game has yet, but if you have the Bodyguard special rule, characters embedded in this regiment do not cause the regiment to break by refusing a duel. I will be the first one to say, and I'm sure my Holdray friend here will agree, I really hope this rule is very, very sparse.
Yep, I have to work hard enough to get them to duel me as it is.
When have you ever had something duel your Ray that wasn't broken?
Never.
I'm really trying to think of a single time that happened.
I don't think it has.
So there's that. H, you got any thoughts on Bodyguards?
Yeah, I'm definitely of the same opinion, kind of in regards to that. Dueling always does feel kind of hard to pull off sometimes. At first, when I saw the rule, I was like, well, I bet 100K are probably going to get something for this, for, they're pitiful Imperial officers or something, but I was surprised that they didn't.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed on it. Like, I almost wish that the rules would change to where Bodyguards were a little bit more prevalent. Like, there were 2 or 3 units across each army that had Bodyguards, but it was either impossible or virtually impossible to refuse a duel in the first place. Because to me, the support characters right now have all the advantages in tactical retinue, giving them all of those morale rerolls. The caster characters never having to get into combat anyway to do what they need to do. I personally would like to see it a little bit more intimidating to have one of those running down on you than just, I'll rally the squad after I refuse the duel. I'd like to see there be some kind of consequence for that. I kind of feel like if you refuse a duel, the enemy character should just be allowed to take a free clash whack at your squad for you hiding in the back. Or you should lose your character's resolve until the next turn. Or, something else. It just right now feels too easy to just refuse a duel.
I mean, it does kind of feel like you can weigh in your mind as like, well, so can I break the squad and will I be okay? And you're going to be weighing how viable of an option that is to losing your character.
Exactly. And I think it does need to be a little bit more of a choice. All right, so the next rule up is Bravery. This regiment ignores the fearsome and terrifying special rules. In addition, at the start of its activation, remove any broken status this regiment may have suffered. As soon as I read this rule, I remembered a certain game with a certain Hans or Vico, someone's Huskarls that stayed broken for how many turns?
Quite a few. Way more than I should have.
And all I could think was, man, if he had just had a Scald with this rule...
Boy, howdy, things would have been much different.
So, I'm guessing we're probably going to see a tartan kilt in your future, right?
Bring out those pipes, boys.
All right, so help me out. Am I missing anything else? What else has Bravery right now?
I have the ability to get it through my Holdray.
The Path to Ogum or whatever?
Yep.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That makes sense.
But I have to complete so many duels with 3 or more command models. I don't see ever getting it.
Yeah, like we just said. Yeah, I got a duel. So, all right. So, but definitely, you're pretty much going to want to get some Bondo and weld your Scald into a Huskarl tray at this point, I think, because he is so much better than he was before. All right, next rule we're going to cover, Dauntless. This regiment may not be broken and always counts its clash actions as inspired. Once again, help me out on my end of things. Spires Inspired created greenskins. I don't think anything has this. Is there anything else that has it?
I've not seen anything.
That's what
memory.
That's what I was thinking. So I'm guessing we'll probably see this in the near future by it being in here. Maybe in City States or Old Dominion, hopefully.
I know there's a number of things that give you automatic Inspire, particularly within 100 Kingdoms, like, Standard Steel and that one upgrade, I think, is Order of the Iron of the Shield. But, yeah, nothing that just says Dauntless.
So maybe we'll see that very soon, because that rule seems like that would be pretty gross to always have. H, that action you're always debating over, should I inspire or not? Now you don't even have to think about it.
If there was a Nord unit that got this, I would heavily consider it.
Yeah, we talked about Deadly Blades and Deadly Shot. I won't get into that as a Spires player. I'm still stinging over that one. So we'll move on to the next, which is Deadshots. Volley actions performed by this regiment always count as having taken aim. This is another rule I don't think we've seen yet anywhere in the game.
No, I can't recall anything.
So that one will be one that we'll see coming in the future, I would imagine. It would definitely be nice, though, to be able to move a unit and still have take aim come under effect for it.
It definitely sounds like something for basically kind of skirmishing units and whatnot, some kind of special archer unit.
That would have been beautiful on a bullet carver now that I think about it.
That probably would have. Yeah.
All right, Dread. Enemy regiments in contact with this regiment may not perform Inspire actions. I think there are a couple of things, or at least one thing in the 100 Kingdoms that already did this, right? One of their standards, I think, made it where they couldn't, attacks couldn't be inspired.
Steel standard.
Okay, so maybe that's just a wording cleanup. Maybe we'll see that more. We'll see what happens there. Then we have Fanatical Devotion. Whenever this regiment is the target of a friendly spell cast by a model with the Priest X rule, it is healed for 3 wounds. That's pretty gross. That's a very nice rule.
Yeah, I definitely do not want to be on the other side of that thing.
Yeah, that is going to be super handy. I really want to see more of that, more stuff like that, where priests in particular, but also wizards are more encouraged to be buffers rather than just go for raw damage, because that's the only thing that makes sense.
It's also good to see, more separation between what priests can do and what wizards can do. That was something I always was wondering why there was a separation in the first place, other than a few things like the Vault.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a good beginner into that process of changing them out. All right, the next one, first in, last out. This regiment rolls for reinforcements as if it were one class lighter, medium instead of heavy, light instead of medium. I think this one's the same. I don't think we've seen anything yet.
I don't believe so.
Okay. We're super prepared today, as I'm sure everyone can tell. But this is another one. You technically kind of have a unit that does this right through your hold things. They kind of have first in, last out.
If my Holdray is my Warlord.
Yeah. So, which you have a lot of contention now for who to choose as a warlord because him and the Curaway, holy crap, both of them are insanely good.
I don't see myself ever taking a tempered from a warlord.
Yeah, unless you're just trying to be nice to whoever you're playing against. Just saying that though through your Thanes, that rule I think is going to make Thanes super powerful. I know we'll get into that more when we get to Dwegs, but I think you agree. It's nice to have them show up earlier because they never really felt like a heavy unit. They always felt like a super. Like, they were really powerful for medium, but they didn't really feel like a heavy unit to me.
Same.
All right, next rule. Flawless Drill. Once per game, this regiment may perform a reform or combat reform action in addition to its 2 actions per turn. In effect, performing 3 actions, one of which must be a reform or combat reform. This rule is not going to be that big of a deal until it is a big deal. I think this rule is one of those sleeper rules that you're going to go multiple games where it really, it makes something convenient at one point, but it's not a big deal. But I think every once in a while, units that end up having this rule are going to be game-changing.
I definitely could see it in particular for range support units. It could definitely be very useful.
I mean, I just know from having fluid formation on so many units in Spires and Wadroon, I have definitely seen how powerful that ability is to reform after doing that other stuff. So I think that will be a big help for whatever ends up with that. It will be interesting to see what they end up putting it on though, because it is essentially, in my mind, a slightly scaled back fluid formation. But it does have that added benefit of, I don't think fluid formation, if I remember right, works. Yeah, it's just reform. It doesn't have a combat reform.
It's also at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, and you can do the flawless drill in the middle if you need to. So it's scaled back, but when you need it, it is more precise than fluid formation is.
I do like to see more things that, do involve maneuvering and stuff, so I'm very happy to see some different things, and it's not just based on basically how good fluid formation is on certain units.
Absolutely, I agree with that. All right, so then forward operations. This is one that I think H and I were both hoping was going to show up for the Stalkers for the Nords, yes. But unfortunately it did not. I was also kind of hoping for it for my Vanguard Clone Infiltrators. This regiment may come onto the battlefield from any point between the reinforcement zone and reinforcement line, ignoring the presence of enemy units. Note that it may still not march through enemy units. There's not a lot we can say about this one yet because we don't know what's going to end up having it. It could be a skirmishing thing. It could equally be a way to get a medium unit into position super quickly. But I see a lot of uses there. H, what dastardly genius have you put your mind to on this one so far? Have you thought about it much?
I've thought if only some kind of a unit within the Nords that could, kind of push all the way up there and then be able to bring in something, not being worried about being broken, having their line broken would just be, superb.
Granted, if you do a certain Dwegum build, you kind of just give yourself forward operations on your whole army. We'll get into that when we get there, but we've been looking at the potential power there, and the stuff you can do with a rule like this is crazy. All right, Glorious Charge. This regiment may add the Inspire bonus to impact hit rolls. In addition, when it successfully completes a charge action, this regiment counts as having the Terrifying 1 special rule for that action. I love this rule because I feel like the limited impact hits we've seen with Brutal Impact so far have been kind of it's Household Knights look really cool on paper and they do a little bit when they charge it, but unless you invest in a Lord and a bigger squad, they don't ever really feel like they get it done. So you're paying all these points to get this certain amount of damage. It feels like this is going to let you up that damage with the units that you're able to get Glorious Charge to. And also having Terrifying 1 is going to make, it's going to massively magnify how much damage that impact is going to do.
It definitely, to my mind, makes sense for heavy shock cavalry and whatnot. I've always kind of was thinking why brutes and cavalry always seem to be very similar, despite the fact that they had separate unit profiles. And I thought one of the things that might make cavalry a little bit different was if they had Inspire for essentially their charge. But I'm glad that this rule's in there because I think that kind of works too for whoever gets it.
Absolutely. Okay, next rule. Hardened X. When an entry with this special rule is the target of an action performed by an enemy, reduce any cleave or armor piercing values that enemy might have by X for this action. I will turn it over to Mr. Dragonslayer to tell you how much he likes this rule.
So, encased in armor as my Dragon Slayers are, they always felt soft to me because they're just as hard as my Huldanes that don't wear near as much armor. It's making my Dragon Slayers a whole lot more survivable, and therefore I think they are going to be infinitely more useful.
I mean, I keep looking at it like from the game you played against Hanser's Nords where the trolls hit your Dragon Slayers. That Cleave 2 just obliterated your Dragon Slayers. It was like they weren't even there. And I kind of felt extremely let down by that because I was expecting this super long fight thing. I don't think Dragon Slayers want to be fighting trolls as a rule.
No.
But I'd at least like to see them put up a fight. I mean, these guys are supposed to be carrying the weapons that slaughtered the former gods of their race. They should be a little more powerful than that. And I keep thinking, with Hardened 1, it is Hardened 1, right?
Yes.
Okay. The trolls are not going to be nearly as effective against you as they were in that game.
Ogre aren't going to be as effective. Marjorie aren't going to be as effective. It just has all-around use, except for really the Spires, I think, are the big one.
Yeah, I still don't want to talk about my Spires right now. All right, go ahead.
I mean, essentially, Cleave 3, I think, is the highest that's out right now, and like the Ice Jotnar, and that would essentially drop them down to a 2 defense, which I think that kind of definitely makes more sense with a giant hitting them, but, they still having a pretty decent chance to, withstand the blow. One thing I am glad with, much like with Bastion, I'm glad that they didn't, hand this out like candy all over the place.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if anybody deserved it, it was Dragon Slayers. It makes sense on them. And the fact that you're still getting a save that's a multiple, and not just one, against an Ice Jotnar means that you are pretty tanky.
Yeah.
So that's I think that rule was a very good addition. I have wanted Dragon Slayers to feel slightly better than they did, and I think that rule helps them out a lot. All right, next rule is Indomitable. Each time an entry with this special rule performs a morale test, discard 1 failed dice with no effect. Always nice to just ignore one. And the great part is you're not just dropping one of the dice that you have to roll. You're actually having to fail it before you drop it. So it's basically supercharged tactical retinue. What has Indomitable right now? Anything?
I know something in Dweg did.
I was thinking there was a Dwegum unit that had it.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Not a big deal. I'm sure some of our listeners are screaming it at the screen right now. But the Dweg picked up a couple of those rules where they just ignore something bad that happens, which I think is very dwarfy. I like the way that feels. All right. The next one is Iron Discipline. This regiment suffers no penalties for having enemy regiments in contact with its flank or rear arcs. It keeps its its shield special rule and does not reroll successful morale checks. Ouch. The ability to not care about flanks. How many times have all of us looked at a charge and been like, I'm not taking that charge because that charge is going to leave my flank exposed to this unit. And then this squad's just like, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't affect anything. This game's all about maneuver, and I think Iron Discipline lets the squads that get it ignore massive parts of the maneuver game and not have to worry about it. Thoughts, Hanser?
Right now, I think it's only the Gilded Legion that have this rule, and I think that definitely fits their style for being this heavy pike unit that can just about take it from all sides. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's another one of those things that I would definitely not be handing this out like candy. It definitely feels like it should only be certain units that should get this kind of thing, because that is a big thing to me.
It definitely is. I kind of Like I've liked Gilded Legion a lot since before we saw their models. Even like looking at them versus Steel Legion, I was like, these guys are pretty decent. They've got a lot of nice things they can do, and support is a big deal. Yeah, they lose 1 point of cleave over the Steel Legion, but they have support, and to me that was a big deal. Iron Discipline does even more to differentiate them from Household Guard, I feel like, and give them their own kind of standing where they really feel like their own unit now. They actually feel like this dangerous tank that can just roll up the field. All right, Lethal Demise is the next drill I marked. Lethal Demise in and of itself didn't change. It's still roughly the same rule, but there was a change made to it. Lethal Demise stands can no longer heal wounds. This is a pretty significant slap to Strix because it did feel like one of their strengths was their ability to get into close combat and then start doing damage and catch hibernations to keep bringing themselves back. But a combination of two things, the fact they can no longer heal wounds and Biomancies and Ferromancies got an incredibly short range on them, makes it to where Strix are not going to be able to take advantage of it even if they could heal wounds anymore. So we'll have to see where this goes. Personally, I think it's going to make units like Strix a little overcosted for what they do. I think 50 points is pretty steep for what the Strix do. But when they become available in North America, I'm definitely going to slap some in a Spire's army and give them a try and see how they do. But that is an important change to Lethal Demise to point out that the units that have that can no longer heal wounds. I think it's also technically a change to the rule that before it did not spell out that morale tests that they failed didn't cause hits. Is that correct? Or can you remember? Not sure. At any rate, you can't do that now for sure. So either way, if they fall to morale, they shouldn't. I think if it wasn't there before, it is a clarification, not necessarily a rule change, because I don't think they ever intended for you to cause damage when you run away from combat. But it is also worth noting that. All right. Line breaker is another rule that now has an X, which is an important thing to note. Because now it ignores up to X total defense gained from Shield and Bastion. So before, Linebreaker just ignored Shield and Bastion. Now, if you are Linebreaker 1 and your target has Shield and Bastion, you are not going to negate them both. You are going to negate one or the other, but you're not going to get both. So we'll have to see where that ends up, see how Linebreaker ends up being effective there. But it does slightly mitigate the Linebreaker rule potentially. Another new rule is loose formation. The regiment gains the obscured special rule, which essentially means that your enemy is always going to be having their shots against them, but you never gain dice from supporting stands. In addition, spells inflict only half the number of hits rounded up that they normally would. I think loose formation is another one we haven't seen anything for yet.
No.
All right.
Because there's not really. I guess this is going to be for like a real kind of skirmish unit for whatever reason.
That's definitely what it seems like. All right, Oblivious is the next one. I will turn it over to Mr. Uger to talk about that one.
So, funny enough, this was the first rule that I saw when I was looking at all the new stuff, and I just happened to land on this when I checked Uger. I was like, what is this in the Army Builder? And I saw this, and I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. I can't believe that they did this, but I'm so glad that they did, because Lord knows how much I have lost Uger to morale saves like nobody's business.
Yeah, Uger were it made sense that their resolve wasn't good, but they were taking slightly too much damage, it felt like, when they got hit. So I do like to see that change. All right, another one that also applies to a unit you're excited for coming up is Opportunists. This regiment may reroll hits if its clash or volley actions are from within the target's flank or rear arcs.
Oh yeah, this is another one of those that I'm definitely one to use with the Fenrir, because they're going to be very good, particularly with fluid formation, to trying to get into flanks and rears. So I cannot wait for this. And was there anybody else that got this rule?
I don't think so. I think the Fenrir's the only thing I noticed it on so far. All right, Overrun. When this regiment declares a charge action against a broken regiment or causes the target of their charge action to be broken when resolving their impact hits, this regiment rolls an additional time for impact hits. If the enemy regiment is shattered or destroyed by this regiment's impact hits, this regiment is allowed to choose the charge action as its second action despite restrictions. This is another one that's going to be really good. You get that small unit that screens you. If you're able to bust that unit with an early charge, then it negates the screen completely. So I think that one's going to be helpful for that. Mm-hmm. All right, and then we have Paragons. The leader model of this regiment may perform a free duel action immediately after this regiment performs a clash action as if they were a character. I don't remember that anything got Paragons yet.
I don't think so.
Okay. I think the closest thing we got right now is the Dwagons duel.
No, it's not Paragon.
Yeah, it's not Paragon, but it's similar. All right, so moving over to the next role, Resolute. While the regiment has 2 or more command models and 3 or more stands, it can claim objectives regardless of restrictions or rules. Have we seen this one? I don't remember this one either.
I don't think so.
So this is another one that we're waiting to see. I do think that this has a very real potential to be powerful on like skirmish style units, if that's the route they end up going with it. Okay, so next one will be Tenacious, and this is another one that I think Putt Hut is upset about. I think he wishes they hadn't put this in his army.
Yeah, I'm devastated.
So each time an entry with this special rule performs an injury roll, discard 1 felt dice without effect. And that's on your Hold Warriors, correct?
Yep, that's the only place I've noticed it.
So every time you hit their basic soldiers, one of their failed shields, they just shrug it off. That is the dwarfiest rule I have ever seen, and I love it. I've always felt like Hold Warriors are way too similar to Men-at-Arms. When in my opinion they should be slightly better, and I love what Tenacious does because it gives them that little splash of zestiness that you don't really want to plinker them now from long range with like just a couple of stands of archers because it's like, this might get one. Well, you got to get 2, buddy, or it's not going to do anything. Any other situations you see Tenacious being particularly handy in?
I feel like it is going to help their survivability a lot, especially if they're running with a Hold Gray and a big block like I like to do. There's all 5, and at that point they're going to be defense 3 and discarding one of the failed results. I just feel like it's making them a ton more survivable.
I agree with that, and I think it's it's a matter of you want to put it on. I think it makes you want to take bigger units of Dwagom too, because the more times you can ignore a wound, the more value that's going to have. So those big blocks are just going to take so much longer to chip down than they did before.
Yep.
All right. The next rule is Untouchable. Enemy regiments in contact with this regiment do not gain any supporting strikes. Again, very powerful, but I don't think we've seen it yet. That would go miles to shut down those stands with support, especially if we start seeing multiple support attacks.
Oh, yeah.
And then Unyielding. While this regiment continues or contests an objective, the opponent may not claim that objective regardless of model numbers. That is going to get so frustrating.
Good Lord, particularly if that's on a character.
Yes, the idea of having to completely rout a regiment before you can take an objective back is not going to be fun. And I imagine with a rule like Unyielding, their resolve is probably going to be ridiculously high too.
You just imagine this, huge army coming. It's like, we have this area, and this guy's like, nope.
No, this is still mine. Sorry. All right. So that's an initial rough overview. We're just kind of glossing over the surface of some of the new special rules and draw events. We just kind of wanted to make a video discussing some of that before we get into our games again. We are going to do another how to play video soon to dig into some of the more nuanced parts of the rules and also just go over the basic fundamentals for new players. The good news is, if you've looked at our how to play videos so far, most of the information in those is still completely valid, hasn't changed much at all, because 1.5, as we said, is more of a polishing than an actual big change. However, there are some big changes that are still coming that you'll see when we get to the army lists. There are big changes there. Most of you who are already into the game and are reading it know these, but there are some very powerful combinations and different flavorful things you can do with your armies now to give them a little bit more of your own personal signature on the battlefield. Anything else you guys want to add before we adjourn for today?
I think we're pretty much ready for, probably what everybody definitely is more excited of, pretty much the armies.
Absolutely. Put anything from you?
Not that I can think of.
All right, so that's going to be all we got for today. If you're looking to begin your own conquest, or if you're looking to expand your conquest line, make sure that you, when you go to the eShop to order, at checkout, click on the question that says, do you have a discount voucher? Enter Maelstrom 10 there. You'll get 10% off your order, and you'll support the channel with an affiliate fee in the process. A lot of you have already done that. We appreciate it more than you know. Doing the battle reports isn't cheap. We still have a lot of technology that we want to add that we haven't yet. And the funds from that are helping to expand all of our channel equipment, our terrain sets, our armies, our lighting and cameras and sound equipment. All of that stuff is being impacted by you buying through their e-store and supporting with the Maelstrom 10 affiliate link. We appreciate all of you who have done that because you are helping us make this channel easier to watch, more entertaining to watch. And that's what we want to do, is give you the best Conquest content that we can possibly come out with. Stay tuned because we're going to have plenty more. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do, and turn on bell notifications so you see our new videos each time one comes out. And make sure that you keep coming back because we have plenty of Conquest content coming in the near future. That's all we have for today. Thank you for spending time with us today at the Maelstrom.